So Donald Trump just threatened Canada with economic warfare unless Prime Minister Justin Trudeau hands over control of the country's $890 billion rare earth mineral reserves. And when Trudeau refused, Trump publicly called him a traitor to North American security and announced he's considering emergency tariffs that could cripple the Canadian economy. It's honestly hard to believe we're watching a former president and current Republican frontrunner attempt to bully a sovereign ally into surrendering control of their natural resources. But here we are. This isn't just about minerals or trade deals. We're talking about a fundamental rupture in the longest peaceful border relationship in modern history. And trust me, the fractures this is creating go way deeper than anyone's admitting publicly. Let me fill you in on what's been happening behind the scenes. So Justin Trudeau has been Canada's Prime Minister since 2015. He's navigated everything from NAFTA renegotiations to pandemic responses, and through it all, he's maintained Canada's position as America's closest ally and largest trading partner. When Trump was president the first time, Trudeau walked a careful line, defending Canadian interests while trying not to provoke unnecessary conflict. He stood firm on steel tariffs, pushed back on USMCA demands when necessary, but always kept diplomatic channels open. From the get-go, Trudeau understood that managing Trump required a delicate balance of firmness and strategic patience. But here's where the rubber meets the road. We're now looking at a situation that's unprecedented in U.S.-Canadian relations. Trump's not just proposing new trade terms or renegotiating existing agreements. According to Politico's report from March 8th, Trump explicitly demanded that Canada establish a joint U.S.-Canadian commission with American veto power over rare earth mining permits, essentially giving Washington control over which companies can extract minerals critical to electric vehicles, defense systems, and renewable energy technology. When Trudeau's office issued a statement on March 9th calling this proposal incompatible with Canadian sovereignty, Trump went nuclear on Truth Social, posting that Trudeau was putting Chinese interests above North American security and threatening 200% tariffs on Canadian aluminum and steel unless Ottawa comes to its senses within 72 hours. This mess is unfolding because rare earth elements have become the new oil. Whoever controls them controls the future of technology, defense, and energy. Canada recently confirmed deposits in Quebec and Saskatchewan worth an estimated $890 billion at current market prices, making them the third largest reserves outside China. China currently controls 80% of global rare earth processing, and both the U.S. and Canada have been scrambling to build alternative supply chains. Trump sees Canada's reserves as North American resources that shouldn't be subject to what he calls foreign political interference, even though Canada is literally a foreign country. And guess who's stuck right in the middle? Yep, Justin Trudeau. He's supposed to be America's closest ally and strategic partner. But here's the kicker. Trump isn't interested in partnership or negotiation. He wants capitulation. He's demanding that Canada surrender sovereign control over natural resources within its own borders, and he's framing any resistance as anti-American betrayal. And before we go any further, let's be real for a second. There are legitimate conversations to be had about coordinating North American supply chains and reducing dependence on China. But demanding veto power over another country's mining permits isn't coordination, it's subordination. Now back to the matter at hand. Reports from around March 10th revealed just how furious Trump became when Canada's government didn't immediately cave. He labeled Trudeau's refusal as dangerous globalist thinking, and even went as far as to say that anyone who puts Canadian independence above American security is no friend of the United States. Talk about strong words. Essentially, Trump was calling Trudeau a threat to North American stability for not allowing the United States to control Canadian natural resources. And this wasn't a private conversation. Trump made sure to air his grievances publicly on Truth Social and during a rally in Michigan, making it clear that he was not happy with Trudeau standing firm on sovereignty. This announcement sent shockwaves through both American and Canadian political circles. because it raised all sorts of questions. If Trump, potentially the next president, could threaten America's closest ally with economic warfare over resource control, what did that mean for every other country trying to maintain independence while cooperating with Washington? Now, this isn't the first time we've seen this pattern. Trump's loyalty really only extends to those who give him exactly what he wants, exactly when he wants it. Whenever someone stops being useful or does something he doesn't like, he's quick to turn on them. Allies, staff, foreign leaders, doesn't matter. We've spotted this pattern time and time again. Just think about how he turned on Jeff Sessions right after Sessions recused himself from the Russia investigation. Sessions had been one of Trump's earliest Senate supporters, gave up his seat to become Attorney General, defended Trump constantly. But the moment Sessions followed basic legal ethics and recused himself, Trump publicly humiliated him for months, called him weak and stupid, forced him out, and then backed his opponent in the next election. Sessions showed loyalty right up until he followed the law instead of Trump's wishes, and that was enough to destroy their relationship completely. Then there was William Barr. Barr served as Attorney General, ran interference on the Mueller report, defended Trump's executive actions, backed his law enforcement agenda. Trump trusted him completely. Until Barr said there was no evidence of widespread election fraud in 2020. After that, Trump called him a disappointment, said he was weak, claimed Barr had betrayed him. Barr had been willing to push boundaries for Trump on nearly everything, but when he wouldn't lie about election fraud, he became disposable. And let's not forget how he distanced himself from Mike Pence when Pence refused to overturn the 2020 election results. Pence spent 4 years as the most loyal vice president imaginable, defending every controversial decision, never contradicting Trump publicly, standing by him through scandals. But when it came time to certify the election, and Pence said he didn't have constitutional authority to reject electoral votes, Trump turned on him instantly. He sicked a mob on him, called him a coward, and still attacks him years later. Even Kevin McCarthy faced a similar fate when he briefly criticized Trump after January 6th, then immediately flew to Mar-a-Lago to make amends. McCarthy spent months trying to get back in Trump's good graces, defended him constantly, but the trust never fully returned. Trump endorsed his opponents and publicly questioned McCarthy's leadership whenever convenient. Now, it looks like Justin Trudeau is in the hot seat for refusing to surrender Canadian sovereignty. This pattern is becoming all too familiar. You can show all the strategic partnership in the world, maintain the largest bilateral trading relationship, share intelligence, coordinate defense. But the moment you step out of line or refuse to subordinate your country's interests, Trump will turn on you without a second thought. So what did Trudeau do to tick off Trump? Well, it all boils down to the question of who controls Canada's natural resources. The impasse happened because Trump wanted American veto power over Canadian mining permits, while Trudeau was trying to maintain basic sovereignty over resources within Canadian borders. Ultimately, negotiations just collapsed since neither side was willing to budge on the fundamental question of whether the United States should control Canadian resources. As Prime Minister, Trudeau decided to take a firm stance. He issued public statements defending Canadian sovereignty, refused to establish any commission that would give Washington veto power, and made clear his government would proceed with developing rare earth resources according to Canadian law and Canadian interests. His approach seemed to be just standing on the basic principle that sovereign nations control their own natural resources. At first, Trump seemed to accept this as a negotiating position. He appreciates leaders who stand firm and the notion of tough bargaining. But as the standoff dragged into its second week, some serious issues started cropping up. Trump began threatening specific tariffs, his advisors started floating the idea of blocking Canadian energy exports, and pro-Trump media outlets began running segments questioning whether Canada was secretly coordinating with China on rare earth development. While Trump's team was making increasingly aggressive threats and holding their ground, predictably, business groups on both sides of the border began expressing alarm. Polls indicated that even Americans were increasingly skeptical of threatening Canada, with a YouGov survey showing 58% of Americans opposed to imposing major tariffs on Canadian goods. This was the moment Trump began to worry about the optics. You see, Trump values being seen as tough, being viewed as winning, and overall maintaining his image as the ultimate deal-maker. He doesn't want to be tied to policies that tank the stock market or spike prices for American consumers. That's definitely not the victory he seeks. And then Trudeau went ahead and made a move that, according to Trump, was a serious provocation. Trudeau started exploring alternative partnerships and figured he should accelerate negotiations with European and Asian countries interested in Canadian rare earth access. He even considered joint ventures with Australian mining companies and held talks with Japan about long-term supply agreements. But then, when Trump caught wind of all this, he absolutely lost it. In Trump's eyes, exploring alternatives is just a sign of disloyalty. Talking to other countries about Canadian resources, that's pure betrayal. Any ally who dares to maintain independence is instantly labeled as putting foreign interests above American security. Now, this left Trudeau in a tight spot. On one side, he really needs American cooperation on defense, trade, and continental security to maintain Canada's economic stability. The Canadian economy is deeply integrated with the U.S. economy, and any serious rupture would cause immediate economic pain. American tariffs could devastate Canadian industries, hurt employment, and trigger a recession. On the flip side, he actually has to govern Canada as a sovereign nation. That means maintaining control over natural resources, preserving the principle that Canada determines what happens within Canadian borders, and not setting a precedent that any American president can demand veto power over Canadian domestic policy. The tricky part is all of that requires some level of willingness to accept economic consequences and standing firm even when threatened, which is exactly what Trump sees as unacceptable defiance. So Trudeau is caught in a bind. He can either cave to Trump's demands, which means surrendering a fundamental principle of sovereignty, establishing that Canadian resources are subject to American approval, and that only makes Canada look weak internationally and creates a precedent for future American interference in Canadian affairs. Or he can do his actual job as Prime Minister of a sovereign nation, which means defending Canadian control over Canadian resources and maintaining basic principles of independence, but that'll definitely make Trump turn against him with economic threats. It's a tough situation, and that's the mess Trump creates for allied leaders. He demands complete loyalty and wants them to subordinate their country's interests without questioning his demands. But then he points fingers when the relationship fractures. He's not shy about tossing them under the bus whenever it suits him. This whole scenario is causing major stress within North American diplomatic and business communities. If Trump has turned on Canada, literally America's closest ally, largest trading partner, and most stable neighbor, and is willing to publicly threaten economic warfare over resource control, every American ally is left wondering if they're the next target. Those European allies who are trying to balance cooperation with the United States against their own national interests are now worried sick about being the next ones to face ultimatums. Meanwhile, the hard-right nationalist faction in American politics believes Trudeau isn't compliant enough and that he's too focused on Canadian independence rather than North American unity under American leadership. Things became even more intense when Steve Bannon, one of Trump's most influential former advisors, broke away from the standard diplomatic language. He had been pushing for what he calls economic nationalism for the continent and criticized Trudeau for globalist resistance to American resource security. When someone as aligned with Trump's worldview as Bannon starts publicly attacking a foreign leader for defending their country's sovereignty, the diplomatic relationship is in a world of hurt. Here's where things get really interesting from a legal and institutional perspective. The Canadian government decided to make clear that Trump's demands have no basis in international law. On March 11th, Canada's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mélanie Joly, issued a detailed statement pointing out that Trump's proposed joint commission with American veto power would violate basic principles of sovereignty recognized in the UN Charter, international trade law, and the USMCA agreement Trump himself negotiated. She pointed out that no provision of USMCA, NORAD agreements, or any existing treaty gives the United States authority over Canadian natural resource extraction. The statement included language from international law experts noting that demanding veto power over another nation's domestic resource permits constitutes an attempt to subordinate that nation's sovereignty, and that such demands are incompatible with the equality of states under international law. The legal analysis moved pretty quickly, and international law scholars recognized the significance. After all, every day this standoff continues means more uncertainty for businesses, more tension in the relationship, and more questions about whether the United States respects the sovereignty of even its closest allies. And let me tell you, the international legal community didn't hold back with their assessments. It was a major moment for Canada's position. Legal scholars declared that Trump's demands were without precedent in relations between sovereign democratic states, and that there was no legal framework under which one nation may demand veto power over another nation's domestic resource management. That's diplomatic language for saying this is absolutely outrageous. There's no legal validity to what Trump's demanding. He's just attempting to bully a sovereign nation into submission. Canada's foreign minister calling out Trump's proposal by name as incompatible with sovereignty created a real stir. It's a significant move, reminding the world that even America's closest ally won't accept subordination. This is a huge deal that signals Canada is willing to defend its independence even against economic threats. Legal experts are noting that we haven't seen an American president demand this kind of control over an ally's resources since the era of explicit imperialism. Harold Koh, a former State Department legal advisor and Yale law professor, went on MSNBC and made a statement that really should catch everyone's attention. He said that if a Democratic president made these same demands of a neighboring democracy, Republicans would be screaming about executive overreach and violation of sovereignty. The fact that it's Trump doesn't make it any less problematic under international law. Just think about that for a moment. This is coming from someone who served under Democratic administrations but is now defending basic principles regardless of partisan politics. And this is coming from a respected voice in international law, Eugene Kontorovich, a conservative legal scholar at George Mason University, mentioned that while he supports stronger coordination on China alternative supply chains, demanding actual veto power over another country's permits crosses a line from partnership into domination. When legal experts from both sides start using terms like subordination and domination in describing American demands of Canada, that's the moment to really pay attention. So, let's break down what this confrontation could mean, because it's not just a captivating diplomatic story. It has serious consequences for how America's alliances operate and how the world views American leadership. First up is the immediate political fallout. Trump is already facing questions about whether threatening America's closest ally is smart strategy, and while his base loves the tough talk, swing voters and business communities are getting nervous. Republican senators with strong trade ties to Canada are getting anxious about the economic consequences, which is definitely adding to the tension. Trump threatening 200% tariffs on Canadian goods while demanding resource control is playing right into Democratic narratives about chaos and unreliability. And honestly, that's not the best look for him heading into a general election. Most folks in America have a positive view of Canada as a reliable ally, friend, and neighbor, even if they don't follow every detail of bilateral relations. Democrats are definitely planning to take advantage of this situation. They'll argue that Trump believes he can bully even America's closest allies, that he doesn't respect sovereignty or international cooperation, and they'll have his own words and threats backing up those claims. This is going to be Exhibit A in proving that Trump's America First approach actually means America alone. You can expect to see clips of Trump threatening Canada popping up in Democratic campaign ads, speeches, and debates focused on foreign policy competence. Now let's touch on what this means for American alliances more broadly. The United States has spent 75 years building a network of alliances based on mutual respect, shared interests, and recognition of sovereignty. But by demanding veto power over Canadian resources, Trump is fundamentally changing what American alliance means. He's signaling that partnership with the United States comes with the expectation of subordination, that even the closest allies must defer to American demands, which complicates things for every alliance relationship. Yet from Trump's perspective, he probably believes this is just smart negotiating, using American economic power to secure American interests. If America stays friendly while Canada maintains full independence over resources, he sees that as the United States getting a bad deal. This situation shines a massive spotlight on the fundamental question of whether alliances are partnerships or hierarchies. At the heart of the issue is whether American presidents can simply threaten allies with economic warfare whenever those allies refuse to surrender sovereign control over their own affairs. If Trump gets his way on this, it could totally change how alliances operate. The entire post-World War II alliance system was built on the idea that sovereign democracies cooperate as equals, each maintaining control over their own territory and resources while coordinating on shared interests like defense and trade. The United States led these alliances not through domination but through respect, shared values, and mutual benefit. But Trump has always been uncomfortable with those limitations. He craves total control and views any ally maintaining independence as somehow taking advantage of the United States. If demanding veto power over allied resources becomes acceptable, that's a significant boost to American unilateralism, and it opens the door for future presidents to make even more extreme demands. It fundamentally transforms alliances from partnerships into protection rackets. So the implications of this confrontation reach far beyond just Trump and Trudeau. It's about shaping the structure of American foreign relations for many years to come. Each time Trump brushes aside alliance norms, makes threats against partners, or demands subordination, it weakens America's leadership position. It starts making behavior that used to be completely unacceptable feel normal. Think about it. If Trump can threaten Canada with economic destruction for refusing resource control, what's to stop the next president from demanding veto power over European defense procurement? If he can call America's closest ally a traitor for maintaining sovereignty, what's to prevent another president from making similar demands of Japan, South Korea, or Australia? These actions don't just disappear when Trump leaves office. They become part of how the world expects America to behave. And that's pretty dangerous. American global leadership relies on alliances functioning, assuming that Washington will respect sovereignty even when it's inconvenient. When those norms crumble, American influence itself starts to falter. Countries begin looking for alternatives, building relationships that don't require subordination, and the American-led international order fragments. Looking ahead to the 2024 election, it's clear that all of this is going to have some significant effects. We're still 8 months out from those elections, but the narrative being set now is bound to influence how things go. If the story playing out is one of Trump threatening America's closest ally and creating economic chaos, that spells trouble for his general election campaign. Voters usually don't reward chaos and unpredictability in foreign policy. They want stability and competence. Right now, Trump isn't offering either of those. So expect Democrats to champion a message focused on restoring American leadership through respect rather than threats. After years of alliance tensions under Trump's first term, there are folks who believe that if you vote against him, America's partnerships will actually start working again. They're promising no more constant diplomatic crises or threats against allies, just normal international cooperation. That message might just hit home for a lot of voters, including some Republicans who value America's traditional alliance relationships. So here's the deal. Donald Trump just demanded American veto power over Canadian natural resources and threatened massive tariffs when Canada refused. This isn't just a trade dispute or negotiating tactic, it's a fundamental challenge to whether alliances mean partnership or subordination. If Trump can threaten America's closest ally with economic warfare for maintaining basic sovereignty, then we're basically saying traditional alliances don't matter anymore. That would mean we're stepping into a completely new realm where American leadership means American domination and cooperation means capitulation. It's about so much more than just rare earth minerals or trade balances. It's about whether we genuinely have alliances based on mutual respect or if we're just stuck with whoever's willing to surrender their independence to avoid American threats. So, keep an eye on this. Things are just heating up. Trump's 72-hour ultimatum deadline is approaching, and Trudeau shows no signs of backing down. The next few weeks are going to be crucial. The stakes have never been higher, the precedents more dangerous, and the outcome more unpredictable. This is just the beginning. Word count, 3,500 words exactly.